I'd like to open the meeting to the sharing of testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Jeremy.
Before coming to Plainfield, my life had really come to a low place. At first, I was trying to pick myself up humanly, as I had not begun to learn about Christian Science yet. Two events during that time helped me to be receptive to God's voice for the first time in decades and allowed me to be ready for this church. I'd like to share them because I am so grateful for all the ways that God has prepared me to be here and to be useful for Him. The first was an article I encountered online about how it is important to set boundaries. When I read that article, I realized I'd never thought of that on my own. And also, I knew that through not setting boundaries, I had allowed myself to sink very low. In the days after this, I thought about how to set boundaries and how to not have that just be an arbitrary practice. If it were arbitrary, then my life would take a nosedive again if I chose the wrong criteria. I realized that I needed God. I began to refer to Him as my North Star, as I needed to separate my idea of Him from the beliefs about God I was taught in Christian Sunday school as a child. I tried to imagine what He must be like. I figured He certainly isn't interested in opinions or hype or probably 90% of the foolishness of human life. I only got into this thinking a little bit, actually, before I was brought here. Once in Plainfield, it was pretty clear as soon as I got here that this was what I was looking for, and I no longer needed to attempt to figure it out on my own. And that's something all on its own that I'm grateful for. The second event was a friend telling me around the same time that I needed to get myself into a situation where I could help people. When she said that, I thought it was so foolish because there I was not even able to help myself. What could I do that would mean anything to anyone anywhere? Thank God He knew how to make that happen. So here I am 3 years later, working for this church. It amazes me every time I think about it. It's such a constant blessing to be a part of this mission. And I'm grateful to say that I have begun to understand how to set boundaries. A few days ago, someone from my past asked me for something that made me uneasy. There was a time I would have done anything I could for this person, but I knew I couldn't do that now, as it would interfere with church work. I thought about the April 3rd, 2016 lesson, where Jesus prevented Mary from embracing Him after His 3 days in the tomb by saying, "Touch me not." That story left me with the thought, no more material interactions. From now on, spiritual interactions only. Because of this, and certainly from the strength and understanding derived from daily practitioner support and all this church offers, I was able to say no to this request. It makes me chuckle to think that I needed to learn I was an unlimited expression of God before I could set boundaries. But that's how it happened. I'm so grateful for all I'm learning here about Christian Science, and so grateful that God clearly loves and cares for us all. Thank you.
Thank you. Donna from Oregon, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to tell you how good I think the forum highlights issues are. I doubt that there's been a single issue that I haven't taken something away with me that was very helpful. Usually it's several things. In issue 69, there was a quote from an article that Milton Simon titled, "Which One?" Part of the quote was, "The error one sees in another is but his own sense of that one, and it's only that sense and never the person that needs to be reformed." I'm finding those words to be very helpful. Thank you to the people responsible for the forum, and thanks to the Plainfield Church, our wonderful practitioners, and our founder, Mary Baker Eddy. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara or Ken from Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Hello, it's Barbara. Nearly 30 years ago, I read an article in either a Christian Science Sentinel article or testimony to the effect that who we should marry is not a personal choice, but a God choice. I remember thinking this was such a helpful concept, but a bit tardy. as I had recently gone through a second divorce. The next 10 years or so were spent doing some much-needed growing, mostly not dating, and assuming God would not want me to marry a third time. One day, though, the idea struck me forcibly that whether or not I remarried was also a God choice. I prayed very sincerely about this for some time, finding many inspiring ideas. The process was an adventure, even fun. Mrs. Eddy's articles, Wedlock in Prose Works and Marriage in Science and Health, were both very helpful, especially as to motive and wisdom. There came a time when I felt a marriage would be right because I felt I had a lot of love to share and needed to grow in ways a marriage would require. Interestingly, as I was in a mental place of being alert to opportunities to express the overflowing love I was feeling to those I came in contact with, a man I would never have personally chosen was brought so beautifully into my experience. Our marriage of 17 years now has been a blessing in so many important ways that we did not foresee. Thank you, Father, Mother, God, for this evidence of your loving care, and thank you, Plainfield, for this lovely service.
Thank you. Karen from Kansas, go ahead.
Hello, everybody. Last week, I found myself covered with bug bites, and they mostly covered my back and itched mercilessly. I was looking for a scratch post. I thought, this is ridiculous. So I called a Christian Science practitioner of this church to help me, and she told me that God did not make pests. That afternoon, I was free. Bug bites no longer bothered me. I went outside and poured water in a bird bath. It was covered with wasps. I kept pouring the water in and watched with amazement. The wasps were not after me. They just wanted water. This confirmed to me the practitioner's assurance that God did not create pests. I'm so grateful for all I'm learning here at Plainfield, and that God creates only good. We are blessed to have such practitioners at our church. And thank you for the reading, and for the music, and for you all just being there. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda from Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you for the very powerful readings and the beautiful music this evening. I am very grateful for finding this fellowship here at Plainfield. Participating here has been slowly freeing me from the beliefs of competition, personality, envy, pride, self-doubt, and painful memories of feeling rejected. I absolutely dreaded making mistakes. Before here, it never occurred to me that a sense of self-consciousness and inferiority was a form of pride and selfishness. I have spent many years worrying that I did not have the affection or respect of one person or another, or that another had more love and respect than I did. Neither did I truly understand how to give God credit for the good that I or another accomplished. Through the tender care, needed rebukes, and loving support here, I have begun to leave all this behind as a bad dream I don't have to entertain anymore. I have been using the Bible and the clear teachings of Mary Baker Eddy's writings that are taught here, and that give me the skills to counter and replace these unhealthy thoughts. There is plentiful material offered on our website to counter the world's messages of lack, rivalry, limitation, and injustice. What I have been learning through church work has been spilling over into all areas of my life. It is wonderful to be part of a group that sees how important each individual member is to the whole of our church, that everyone has a unique role to fill and purpose given by God. It is such a blessing to be in a safe environment with individuals striving for clear, independent thinking. My practitioner referred me to a line in the hymn on page 176 that says, "Living stones, we each in his place, may we be worthy such a grace." Thank you.
Thank you. Sana or Tom from Illinois, go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to give gratitude to Plainfield for the watches that are done regularly by this church. Mrs. Eddy did them in her home as a protection and in handling whatever challenges they were facing. Recently, just at the start of one of these watches, I was upstairs in my home and was startled by the sound of a huge crash. Just then, my stepdaughter yelled out to call 911 that a car had just gone over the side of a bridge visible from the downstairs window. She and my husband then ran out the door in that direction, and I felt a moment of panic as I pictured a car submerged in the water. But as I dialed 911, the thought came to me, no, all is well. Within moments, police arrived on the scene a short time after my husband and stepdaughter had gotten there. It appeared the vehicle that crashed had been going at a high rate of speed and hit a boulder, which caused the car to completely flip over near the edge of the bridge. Despite all the damage to the vehicle, which was lying upside down, the young couple inside emerged a little shaken up but without a scratch. My husband and stepdaughter each told me later how they felt that all was well as they made their way to the scene. And we also talked about how the watches help clear our thought and keep it on God and His control over all. Needless to say, we were most grateful for the protection we witnessed in this situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Lil.
I am so grateful for God's protection. Monday, I was doing a couple of things here at church when suddenly it became extremely windy. Opening a door, I found only gusty wind, but no rain. I still needed a minute more to finish and felt right about finishing it and then leaving. As I was leaving, it did begin to rain. I got a block from church when suddenly a huge tree fell across the road in front of me. And that was the road that I was on, landing on wires and the street. If I hadn't stayed the extra minute, I'm sure I would have been hit. I just thank God that I got the thought to stay at church the extra minute. That was not luck, but that was God's guiding. He's speaking to us every moment, and we must listen and obey. I'm just so grateful for His protection. And thank you for those wonderful readings.
Thank you. Mike from New York, go ahead.
Thank you for the wonderful service. The hymns, the readings, and the testimonies are tremendous. Over the past weekend, my wife, daughter, and I went to a family wedding in California. Thankfully, after a little over a year of participation here at Plainfield Christian Science Church, I no longer leave God at home when I travel. So there was quite a number of demonstrations made. One in particular for the significant lessons learned I'm most grateful for. In the past, I've been prone to sunburn, getting it very easily. Our first day, my family and the sister-in-law went to the beach. Mary Baker Eddy uses the sun as a metaphor to explain God's attributes. Lately, when out in the sun for long periods, I think of Mrs. Eddy saying, we don't absorb God, so we should be a transparency for God to shine through. So I've been praying to also be a transparency for the sun and not absorb it. That day I had only applied a bit of sunscreen to my ears. Even with that, I had only one spot of my left on my left temple, which came close to being overcooked. Probably some significant point there that I haven't figured out quite yet, but otherwise perfectly fine. I have to say from past experience, amazingly fine, because unfortunately the others who usually do better than I got burned, some quite severely. My daughter, who does study Christian Science, had used sunscreen. She'd spent a few more hours playing in the sun and didn't do very badly at all. After 2 days of lotions, rubbing on spots, I gave her a Christian Science lecture on God's virtues, and that was in the evening, and the next day she was essentially fine. This whole experience kind of came back to me when I read in Science and Health one morning this week. On page 360, Mrs. Eddy says, "Dear reader, which mind picture or externalized thought shall be real to you, the material or the spiritual? Both you cannot have. You are bringing out your own ideal. This ideal is either temporal or eternal. Either spirit or matter is your model. If you try to have two models, then you practically have none." So I am so absolutely grateful for God's power over all errors, and most grateful for Christ Jesus and Mary Baker Eddy's accurate teachings and sacrifices and giving them to us to use. And I am most grateful for what I'm learning from everyone here at Plainfield and the availability and helpfulness of my practitioner also.
Thank you. Chardell from Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Good evening. First, I'd like to thank you for this most wonderful service. Tonight, I would like to testify to a changed life after coming to Plainfield Independent Christian Science Church 2 years ago. Although I had been introduced to Christian Science many years ago and went through class instruction, it wasn't until coming here that God's love and the understanding of Him started to take hold. Mrs. Eddy's complete works were not revealed to me until now. She sacrificed everything to bring true Christianity to her students and to the world. My appreciation for the Christ through her works is boundless. Plainfield teaches as she instructed, and we are brought spiritually higher and maintained. My cup runneth over. Thank you, Plainfield.
Thank you. This is Bruce. I'm very grateful for an article that's on our website on the carousel on the front page, and it's called God Works With You. And it was by Edward Kimball, where he describes a conversation that he had with Mrs. Eddy, where Mrs. Eddy reminded him, remember, God worketh with you. Mr. Kimball had a response, and then Mrs. Eddy had a response to his, and it's very, very instructive. But the thing that benefited me one day was just leaving with the impression, knowing that God is beside me, He's in front of me, He's behind me, He's working with me instead of me isolated all by myself. And I had an experience that proved that. We had a visitor, one of our members came to our church, and it was like 2 Saturdays ago. And this lady spent so much time working with me and helping me, taking care of some things around here. And I kept on thinking, it's so easy to think, oh, this person helped me. And they did, but it's so important to take it one more step. This is an example of God working with us all. And in this case, God was working with both me and her. Because it was so pleasant, so enjoyable, and it was something that I was kind of like putting off, knowing that I had to do it sometime. And we had a great time doing it, a lot of fun. So guess what? God was working with us, and we had a wonderful time because of it. Thank you. Craig.
Those are truly inspiring readings. What all this good, so many good things we have a history of, have already been done for our benefit to know, and to know they can continue to be done. And there will forever be a great need, I believe. Well, there will be a great need to do good, to lift others. Well, I was given an article by a practitioner some time ago, a target out of range. Not quite sure where it came from, but it just protected me and opened up more and more. It goes like this, and it allows me to keep my peace and to be effective. In purity, meekness, and love, I go to my Father, to the one ego in mind, because I used to think that I did everything. One ego in mind, not matter, informed by Christian science, divine science. Well, that's paraphrase, but the point is that it is God that we're striving as we try to purify ourselves, to get rid of false beliefs and to take on and express the truth, and to be that person, that individual. And it's totally wonderful. And everybody else, and this ego is infinite. It's everybody's individuality. And it made it so easy to see other people as beautiful and good, no matter what else claim. And I thank God for things like that, because it just totally took me out of the picture and let me see that even when I was feeling lousy or got a suggestion of that I was less than good, that I was wonderful and I could do good and wonderful, and if I just stuck to it, it would happen, and it did. I thank God for the power of the truth, the great lessons, proofs we've seen, and we see again, because we stick to it, there's always peace and great works in the end. Thank God for Mary Big-Grady.
Thank you. Betty from California, go ahead.
Good evening. Tonight I was reminded of a healing I had a few years ago. My back had been bothering me quite a bit, so I called a practitioner from the Plainfield Church for help. She said she would work for me, and then she told me that I needed to unclench my thought, like letting go of a rubber ball. The ball and I could then bounce back. That made perfect sense. Pretty hard to relax and let God in when my thought was clenched shut. This healing took a couple more days of practitioner help. I was completely healed while I was listening to the Sunday service on my computer. I'm most grateful for this healing and proof of God's love, and for practitioner help, and for Christian Science as taught in this church. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol.
Last week I woke up in the middle of the night with a terrible toothache and my face was all swollen. I prayed and worked for over an hour and then the pain just stopped. I was so grateful to be able to go back to sleep. In the morning I called a practitioner for help. She told me to work with the scientific statement of being and that she would be happy to help me. And she said, going to the dentist is just like taking your car to the garage. It's no big deal. You just go in, get it fixed up, and go on with your work for God. So I called my dentist, and they said, can you come over right now? We just had a cancellation. I knew that was God taking care of every detail. So I went right over, and everything was taken care of perfectly, quickly, and with no more pain. I am very grateful to God for this healing, and so very grateful for the practitioner's help, and just how everything worked out so beautifully, and I'm just so very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Florence from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. Tonight I'd like to share a few things I've learned through Christian Science. A previous testifier talked about having boundaries. Along my way, it felt like I needed laws that would govern me. For example, to think of the fact that I can only go onward and upward and make that a law for myself. It's interesting that Mrs. Eddy only spent or used 6 pages in a 700-page book dedicated to animal magnetism, which means that we should recognize error, see what it is, but not dwell on it. I used to spend so much time when things came up, why, what, reading extensively, trying to find so-called solutions. Soon I learned that, just as she said, recognize what it is, see what it's trying to do, and quickly go to the truth, which will uplift thought. I started to do this, and one morning I heard this clearly. It said that if you think God most of the time, you will have good most of the time. It sounded simple, but this evening the first hymn reminded me of it. It says that all truths are ours for proving. I started to stay with one truth at a time, which helped me to quickly turn my thought to God and keep it there. And with that I found that it was easier to see error, its lies, and see what it's trying to do, and not allow it. So many of these truths are so easy to take into our hearts if we're really looking for it and yearning for them. I thank God for Christ Jesus, all that, the healings that he did, with so many truths that we can just take one simple one and make our own. I thank God for Christian Science also for teaching us how to prove these in our lives. They are simple, they make sense, and so we can prove them in our lives. Thank you all for the testimonies tonight. The readings were very powerful, and the hymns very comforting. Happy to be here tonight.
Thank you. Mary.
I'll read from our church website bulletin board, the first from Virginia. Many thanks to Joseph for the beautiful and evening prayer and Bruce's narrated Dominion Within by Reverend Kratzer on the website Carousel. Both are inspiring and give much to work with. And then 2 from Pennsylvania. I love these words of Mary Baker Eddy from Collectania. Mortal mind has not been kind enough to me to cause me to want to loiter in it. And then also, the audio of The Greatest Thing in the World by Henry Drummond in Joseph's Corner on the Plainfield site is wonderful. Thank you, Joseph and Plainfield. And then Costa Rica. I could go on, but I'm very grateful for our Plainfield Church and all its activities. Now Bruce and Florence are into audio recording, which I think is great, as the mental attitude of the individual doing the reading is very important. And Georgia, I've been searching for the perfect bedtime prayer for my home for quite some time now, and I'm so grateful that I have finally found it. Joseph's recording of an evening prayer gives just the confidence and courage needed during the night as well as the day, and the warm music gives the added touch of comfort that brings it all together. It stills the aggressive suggestions of the need to be fearful in the apparent absence of light, with a reminder of our Father's ever-presence. Thank you so much. And then Pennsylvania. I was able to listen to readings from Science and Health on my phone when they popped up. That's on YouTube today. Although I have read the chapter on prayer several times, These readings brought new comfort, peace, and a fresh striving. Thank you all who read and make this available and possible. And then a letter from Virginia. Dear fellow members, enclosed is my monthly contribution sent with many thanks for all the good that this church is sending out to the world. It's been my habit, when I have a need, to open the Bible or Science and Health to find an answer for some time now. I found that the church website is rich with material to turn to in time of need. There are church services, Bible studies, roundtable discussions, articles to read by Mrs. Eddy and many other workers, many current and relevant publications, and the audio library is a special gift. There's always an answer to just what I need. So thank you, Plainfield. I'm grateful tonight, too, for this service, the readings tonight, to trust in truth and have no other trust. I know before coming here I did have many other trusts. I didn't really know what God was, and how can you trust something if you don't really know what it is? So I'm grateful for a much deeper understanding of God. I'm grateful for all the activities we have in this church that deepens this understanding. I was thinking today how if you don't have this understanding of God, you would be tempted to look elsewhere. When we drive around New Jersey, sometimes take a drive, often in the towns we see shops, astrology shops, or tarot card reading shops. And I thought, this comes about when you don't understand who and what God is, and you're looking for other answers. Years ago, in working with a practitioner in this church, she taught us the importance to understand about something like astrology, spiritualism, all those things. It's nothing to be ignorant about. In the Blue Book, on page 199, Mrs. Eddy says, astrology, belief in a horoscope, is a mortal thought, and it does actually affect human lives until it is overcome by Christian Science. Every human being comes under its influence unless and until we meet it with the truth. Astrologists believe that a man can improve on his horoscope. And then Mrs. Eddy said we were also to know that there was no solar, lunar, or planetary influence. Now, with this practitioner that I worked with, she taught me about this. I had never thought about it before. I thought, well, it was none of my business because I was a Christian Scientist after all. But after this teaching from her, when I looked at my astrological sign, I was almost shocked at how much my human personality would seem to line up with it. And I realized that it is something that I do have to handle. I do have to be aware of it, and to know that my individuality is in God, and it is not in any way influenced by planetary movement. In Science and Health, Mrs. Eddy says in her chapter, Animal Magnetism Unmasked, the planets have no more power over man than over his maker, since God governs the universe. But man, reflecting God's power, has dominion over all the earth and its hosts. Now that is the truth, but we need to be awake to the belief so that we can handle it with the understanding of the truth, so that we can trust in truth and have no other trust. We turn to God for all our answers, and in doing so, we are blessed. I'm so grateful to be here tonight and for the beautiful music, readings, and testimonies. Thank you all.
Thank you.